Hi friends, this is chapter 4 of The Secret World of Magic Dolls and Imaginary Friends. Let's begin. Christmas had come and gone for 1935 and a new year was about to commence. I had made a solemn vow to try and work and save for the rest of the year to buy myself my very own doll. I had a large doll collection, but they were mostly handmade dolls or gifts from other people. My mother agreed to let me work as long as I could do my schoolwork and daily chores at home. Being a hard worker, I put my mind to it and began looking for a job somewhere close to our house. My mother and I wrote our names on small pieces of paper, and I went from store to store asking anyone if they would allow me to work for them. Most people said they simply could not afford another person to work for their stores, but the drugstore owner, Mr. Benjamin, knocked on the door 3 days later, and I went in to see him. He said he really thought about it and wanted someone 2 days a week after school, so this would be my very first job. I was sweeping his floors for the drugstore and at our corner. I swept from 10 minutes before 3 till 4 o'clock when after school ended. So I would run up the street to make it on time. They paid me 2 cents for the whole hour, and that was a large fortune for someone with nothing in their pocket. I was able to work there Mondays and Fridays during the week. My feet hurt by the end of the hour, but it was well worth it to me. My mother had taken an empty jam jar and made the prettiest money holder I had ever seen. It was a clear jar with a pale blue sash that tied the lid shut, and I kept my earnings in there. And my mother put it way up high on the shelf for safekeeping. I had worked at the drugstore 2 times a week for the whole winter and into the spring, and by Easter I had saved up a whole 16 cents. I shook the jar filled with copper coins that made a happy rattling with joy. These large coins were now getting very heavy. Last Friday afternoon, while I was at work, Mr. Benjamin had told me to clean out the storeroom in the back, and he asked me to sweep and move all the boxes from one side of the room to the other. He was expecting a rather large delivery and needed to fit it all inside. I no sooner went into the back room than my ears heard a riot coming from the front of the store. I crept around the corner and stood back in fear. Right before my eyes, there were the Delaney sisters. Mrs. Delaney was having a scuffle with Mr. Benjamin. I gasped in horror as my eyes laid upon this tall, very large and scary woman. I had never seen one of them this close before, and she was a very frightening lady to me. Mr. Benjamin was trying desperately to assist her with her mighty handfuls of bags that she unusually took with her unusual umbrella. "Let me be," she balked at him as Mr. Benjamin diligently held onto her handfuls of packages. They both struggled. While she tried to leave through the front door, I suddenly heard a generous ripping sound as Mrs. Delaney's long black gown began to rip up the back seam. Her dress seams separated and the rip allowed for her large bottom to emerge from her dress. She was wearing a big pair of orange lacy bloomers. "Oh my!" she shrieked, while her hand flared aimlessly, feeling her behind was free to the air. Mrs. Delaney said, "Please let me help you." He begged of her. She nudged him backwards onto the cotton ball crate on the floor. Mr. Benjamin's body went reeling backward as he was forced to sit abruptly on the lower crate. His long legs spread out wide. His arms had knocked over all the sewing kits, and the shoehorns came out one of their tins. He attempted to get up from his awkward seating position, only to knock more items over onto the marble floor. Mrs. Delaney's arms carried a bulky carpet bag. This was sent into the miniature sweet treats machine and sent it on the floor too. A tiny blue clown that was positioned inside the machine was now twisted around and landed on the pile of candy now resting on the floor below. I was expecting it to shatter, but I realized it merely bounced when it hit the floor. Her huge umbrella knocked into the razor bucket, and the shaving paste eventually in the mirrors all swiftly cascaded across the floor, taking everything in their path. From this avalanche, the unmatched pair danced in an awkward tango, causing two shelves to lean together. This event sent off the domino effect, and ladies' lipsticks now began to roll across the floor one by one. One of the lipstick cases rolled right up to my toe, where I bent over to pick it up. Mrs. Delaney's backside leaned harshly against the soda machine. The metal door gave way, and it ripped her bustled and tangled with silver handles. Her rear end accidentally slammed into the back of the red cola vending machine, making another loud bang. Mr. Rudy from the candy shop next door heard this ruckus and came in. He found the bumbling pair and walked them to the car. I could see the three of them eventually through the glass door and on the outside of the front window. They were still fumbling and hitting into one another as the trio disappeared around the bend. I bent down and began to put the soda bottles back in the machine. They had rolled so far under the machine, I had to crawl along the entire floor to collect them all. I gently placed everything back to where it belonged. I slid the razors and the mirrors back on their hooks. I retrieved the shaving paste and the containers, and it took me a while, but the store looked back to normal. The only object which was truly broken was the silly clown that was dethroned during the scuffle. I placed the giant bubble back in the machine, and I tried my best to affix the clown in his rightful place. The clown's seat was permanently broken, so I gently placed him sideways. When I was there, I was sure I had cleaned up Mrs. Delaney's widespread disaster. I went back into the storeroom and continued my duties there. The floor still needed sweeping and the boxes need to be moved. About 10 minutes later, Mr. Benjamin had come back into the store and wearily smiled when he opened the door. He placed his hands on his chest and muttered a prayer to himself. He made his way back into the storeroom and patted me on the head. Oh, that woman. Every time she refuses to let me help her. She does this every week. She's like a tornado. Mr. Benjamin sat on the pile of newspapers. His hands were shaky as he removed a hanky from his shirt pocket and proceeded to wipe the sweat off his drenched brow. "You're a good girl, Dorothy," he said, looking down on the floor. "You go home. I'll clean the back myself." I looked at him and tenderly said, "No, sir. I'll stay and help you. I insist." I then handed my own hanky from my own shirt pocket to Mr. Benjamin and took the new hanky and finished wiping his wet head. Still looking tired, he gave me another pat on the head. Two can work faster than one, and he rose up from the newspapers and began helping me move the boxes across the floor. After the back room was cleaned, I slowly walked home, enjoying the quiet of the hill. The remainder of the week's end was calm, and my father and I visited the river as usual. There were fewer birds than normal, and the flowers and trees had begun their annual sprouting. On Monday, we had a test at school, and we all did very well. Miss Cordelia gave the whole class gold stars on our papers, after which we had a cupcake party to celebrate the school's end. I had finished school at 10 minutes to 3, so I began my walk to the drugstore. My friends Sadie's and Leslie walked me halfway to where their jobs were at the butcher's market. They watered the plants and kept them outside and very tidy. I would often wave to them during the day when I would pass them by. They both worked much harder than me, but their mother and father owned the store, and they had to work very hard every day. Today was not the usual brisk, sunny walk to the drugstore after school. It was getting warmer outside, and what was a cold walk now became a sunny stroll. My arrival at the drugstore was quiet, and there was a very few customers in the store. After that hour was up, Mr. Benjamin reached over the counter and gave me an envelope with my name on it. He said he was sure going to miss me around here, but he could get another child to do the sweeping after school. When I asked him what was going on, he simply said, "Go home today and have a conversation with your mother." I gave him a puzzled look and I ran for home, getting there in record time. I ran home as fast as my legs would carry me. I think I bumped into 20 people trying to get home faster. Once I ran up the steps, I could see my parents in the kitchen waiting for my arrival. "What's happening?" I asked, completely out of breath. "Well, you've got a new job," my father shouted. "A new job?" I asked, looking very puzzled and confused. Just then, Aunt Nan came around the corner into the kitchen where she was standing. "Oh, I see you ran all the way here." I sat on the chair and took a deep breath. The three of them sat with me, and my father began telling me Aunt Nan had been working at the toy shop in town, and the owner really needed another helper to clean and sweep his floors. Mr. Hudson's shop was getting ready for the spring cleanup, and they thought I might like a new job there. My eyes lit up like cherry bombs on Independence Day. I could hardly believe my ears. "You would really be helping me out, dear," my aunt said to me as she passed by and passed out the cookies from that filled cookie jar. "She's very responsible," said my mother. "So it's settled then. You can start next week." Nan had been teaching me how to sew and stitch garments for the sewing room at church, so I felt ready for a new job. She had only worked at Hudson's toy shop for a few months, but she convinced the owner to let me mend and treat the dolls and toys as needed, and mending them is exactly what I would do. My mother tapped me on the shoulder. "Didn't you forget something?" She pointed to the little white envelope on the counter. "Oh, I had forgotten all about it with all the excitement," I said, taking a sip of chilly water and waiting with anticipation for her to open the envelope. "Open it, Mom, please," I said, waiting to see the contents. My mother calmly opened the white folded envelope with her gentle hands and pulled out a crisp dollar bill folded in half. She let out a gasp and then another. My jaw dropped too. We were both amazed that Mr. Benjamin had given me a generous parting dollar, which was a lot of money, especially to somebody with no money. There was a note that said, "Thank you, dear Dorothy, for a job well done, from Mr. Benjamin." I had actually begun to cry, and my mother took a slight step backward and murmured, "Holy smoke," to herself. "You made quite a friend." And she gently caressed my arm and placed the dollar bill in my filling jar. "You had better send him a note for his kindness," she said, nodding her head. "Oh, I will," I said right away. Still in shock, I gave my special doll another thought, and I was that much closer to buying her before next Christmas. Well, that's it for today. Stay tuned tomorrow for Chapter 5. Bye.